All right, so ready to dig into something new. We're talking production pottery today, and using these RoleCatcher excerpts you sent over as our guide, we're going to see what they have to say about, well, making a career out of clay.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see more and more people, interested in this kind of like, I don't know, return to handmade goods.
Totally. And you know what really stood out to me was how RoleCatcher breaks down the career path. Like, you start as an assistant production potter and can actually work your way up. It reminds me of, like, leveling up in a video game almost. What'd you think about their take on that whole progression?
I think they really emphasize hands-on experience, which is, really where it's not just textbook learning, it's apprenticeships, workshops, just constantly practicing. That's how you get good.
Yeah, for sure. Like, you can't learn how to center clay on a wheel just from reading about it, right? You got to get your hands dirty. Speaking of which, I really liked RoleCatcher's tips on how to even get started, joining clubs, going to workshops. Seems like networking is almost as important as knowing, like, what temperature to fire your kiln at, huh?
Oh, for sure, for sure. Pottery's really a community thing. Even though you think of it like the artist alone at the wheel, a lot gets passed down, from mentor to mentee. Plus, there's something really cool about seeing your work alongside other people's.
Yeah, absolutely. RoleCatcher mentioned exhibiting your work, and it made me think of all those amazing pottery exhibitions I've been to. Everyone's got such a unique style.
Hmm.
But before you even get to that point, having a good online presence is key these days, don't you think? It's almost like setting up your own online store.
It's essential now, really. Got to have a website or be active on social media, and that's where a really good portfolio comes in.
Makes sense. RoleCatcher talks about clients doing custom orders,
Hmm.
and having a digital catalog of your work would be amazing for that. So, like, how do you balance doing client work with staying true to your own style as a production potter? You know what I mean?
Right. It's definitely a balancing act. You want to stay true to your own artistic vision, but then there's also something really rewarding about like creating a custom ceramic tile for someone's house or a set of mugs for their business.
Oh, wow. The possibilities. That actually makes me think about the technical side of things more. RoleCatcher mentions different types of clay, stoneware, earthenware, porcelain. Each one's got its own, I don't know, quirks. Like, let's say you're making a really big, really intricate vase.
Hmm.
How do you even choose what clay to use? And what are some of the technical things you got to watch out for?
Okay, so that's a really good question, and it shows like how much is involved beyond just the design aspect. So, for a really large, intricate vase, you'd probably want to use stoneware. It's strong, it's durable, which is what you want. But the challenge is making sure that the walls are the same thickness, otherwise they could crack when you fire them, especially with those really detailed designs. And you have to remember that each clay type it fires differently. Like the temperature and even how long it takes to cool down, that's all different for each type.
Wow, so it's like you have to be a chemist on top of being an artist.
Exactly. And speaking of firing, RollCatcher doesn't shy away from the fact that firing is like a science in itself. Temperature, timing, even the tiniest little change can totally change how the piece turns out.
Man, that's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
It makes you realize, even with all the creativity involved, there's a huge emphasis on the business side of things too, like managing all those client orders, production schedules. Organization must be key. Was
Right.
that hard to get a handle on when you were first starting out?
Oh yeah, definitely. Finding that balance like between being in the creative zone and then having to like send invoices and stuff, it's something you learn as you go for sure. When I first started out, man, I was so focused on just like making the best mugs I could, pricing, time management. Yeah, that was definitely not my strong suit.
It's easy to get caught up in the creative side of things, totally. But those practical skills, they really make or break your career, huh? And RoleCatcher doesn't sugarcoat it. They actually talk about standing out in a
Wow.
really competitive field. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's more important now than I think it ever has been. There's just so much out there, especially online, visually, You really got to find your lane, something that makes your work stand out. Rollcatcher had a bunch of suggestions like playing with different textures, colors, even like mixing in other materials besides clay, which I thought was pretty cool. Don't be afraid to experiment, basically, even if it seems a little out there.
I love that. Push the boundaries, see what happens, right? Because at the end of the day, that's what makes art so interesting to look at. It's expressing something, something unique, something that other people connect with.
Yeah, exactly. It's like telling your story through whatever you're making. And that's what always gets me about these really successful production potters. They're not just making like a bowl or a plate, they're putting themselves out there.
Oh, that reminds me of something else RoleCatcher mentioned, the physical demands of it all. It's not easy being a production potter, is it?
Yeah, no, it's definitely something to consider. We're talking like hauling around 50-pound bags of clay, spending
Hmm.
hours hunched over a wheel, not to mention loading and unloading the kilns. You need to be strong, you need stamina, and like RoleCatcher said, knowing good ergonomics is super important. You don't want to mess up your back.
Definitely not. Yeah. It's a good reminder that this is definitely physical work as much as it is creative work. Speaking of being aware, RoleCatcher also talks about how sustainability is becoming a bigger and bigger deal. It's not just about like the final product looking good. It's about how you got there too.
Yeah, 100%. There's a lot more awareness now about, environmental stuff than there used to be, where you get your clay, how much waste you're producing, even what kind of glazes you're using. It's all connected.
It's like it gives a whole new meaning to the work itself, wouldn't you say?
Totally. If you can make something beautiful, functional, and like, it was made with respect for the planet, I think that says a lot.
It's about the whole package, for sure. And it makes you think about how long these pieces are meant to last, too.
Mm.
We're not talking like fast fashion or whatever. These things are built to last, maybe even become family heirlooms, right?
Absolutely. And that kind of goes back to something RoleCatcher talked about, finding your why, your purpose. Why'd you get into pottery in the first place? What are you trying to say with your work? It can really help you, I think, figure out what you want to make. And it resonates with people when they get it.
It's about being genuine, having real craftsmanship, and just being thoughtful about what you create. And to help with that, RoleCatcher actually has a ton of extra resources in this guide. Career guides, interview prep, even links to like the International Ceramic Artists Network.
Yeah, they really went all out with this one. And that network is amazing. Meeting other artists, keeping up on what's trending. It's definitely something to check out.
Sounds like an amazing resource if you're serious
Wow.
about doing this, that's for sure. It's funny as we've been talking, I keep thinking about how people always picture production potters as like lone wolves.
Yeah, alone in their studios, covered in clay. It's a classic image.
Totally. But it sounds like it's actually way more collaborative than that.
Oh, 100%. Like working with clients on those custom orders or even bigger projects where you're working with other artists, even just bouncing ideas off each other. It's all part of it.
So being able to communicate your vision, being able to work well with others, that's just as important as like knowing how to throw a pot.
For sure, for sure. If you can't explain your vision, if you can't take feedback or work with clients, it's going to be tough.
Yeah, it really changes how you see it, right? It's not just you and the clay. It's like this whole network of people.
Exactly. You have those quiet times in the studio, of course, but then you've got this whole other side where you're talking to other artists, sharing ideas.
It's that balance, right? Like
Yeah.
expressing yourself, but also being part of something bigger.
Well, we've covered a ton today. The technical stuff, the business side, even how to be more sustainable. So, as we wrap up, what's like one big piece of advice you'd give to someone who's thinking, hey, I want to be a production potter?
Honestly, don't be afraid to just go for it. Like even if
Good.
it's messy, even if you screw up a bunch at first, experiment and see what happens. Clay is pretty forgiving that way. I love that. Don't be afraid to mess up a little. It's all part of the process, isn't it? Because that's what's so cool about pottery, right? You're taking this like lump of earth and turning it into something beautiful, something that'll last. And hey, who knows? Maybe someday we'll be seeing your work in a gallery. And that would be something.
It definitely would. And for everyone listening, make sure to check out those RoleCatcher links. They're super helpful if you're really serious about this. This is really just the beginning, Now it's your turn to get out there, get your hands dirty, and see what you can create.